This is Retail Voices, the podcast where leaders from the world of retail and outside of retail talk straight about what really works. Insight, innovation, and the human side of the industry all in one place. Hosted by Mark Lack. That's me. Let's dive in. Great. So, hi Shikha, and welcome to Retail Voices.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Really excited to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you here. In this episode, we're going beyond sales and discounts to talk about something much deeper, value. What it really means, how customers perceive it, and why it's more crucial than ever in this volatile economy we find ourselves in. Shikha, you're the lead partner for consumer and retail at Simon-Kucher, one of the world's most respected consultancies in pricing, sales, and marketing. Can you start by telling us a little bit about you, your role, and what keeps you busy these days?
Mark, what doesn't keep me busy these days? But let's talk about my role. I've been with Simon-Kucher for almost 15 years at this point, and you already highlighted the expertise in pricing, sales, and marketing. When it comes to consumer and industries, there's a lot that we cover. So anywhere from consumer goods, fast-moving consumer goods, or slow-moving, also known as durables, food and non-food. We also cover retail, fashion, apparel, big retailers, specialty retailers, as well as services. So anything that's under this umbrella of B2C, we cover. And so in my role at Simon-Kucher as a partner and lead partner for consumer is to make sure that we are always at the cutting edge of technology in terms of how we deliver our products and services, but also keeping a pulse on the changes in macros, understanding consumer sentiment, behavior, attitudes, and how those evolve. And I know we'll talk about that today. And also just finding impact, right? The number one the number one goal we have for our clients is delivering impact. So impact typically is through revenue and profit growth. How you achieve that can be in multiple ways, but the most effective lever is through the top line, is through topics like pricing and so on, and sales and marketing, because that's going to drop straight to the bottom. Absolutely. And what keeps me busy? So many things. AI, right? Like AI is everywhere. I can't escape it. We should do a count of how many times I use the word or you use the word AI during this session. It was turned into a drinking game or a bingo game. And then as well as the macro economy. So Mark, just the fact that it's just been since the pandemic, right? I've been doing this for a long time, but since the pandemic, things are just so volatile. They're so fast changing. We wake up feeling really great about our lives one day, and then the next day everything's going down, into the shitter, and then vice versa. And so like this constant push and pull and the lack of clarity across economic indicators just makes it that much harder for retailers and brands to navigate.
Absolutely. It's certainly since the pandemic, and I think that's another phrase that I can use speaking to people over the last couple of years and the last few months, in fact, on the Retail Voices show. The amount of times AI comes up, but also since the pandemic is another one that we tend to use as some phraseology. You've advised some of the world's biggest retail and consumer brands. And when you look across the industry today, what's changed most about how customers define value? How do customers now define value?
There's three things I've learned over my time here that are most critical about value. First of all, value is in the eyes of the beholder. So Mark, we could be looking at the same, let's say, car, or the same bag of chips, or the same, hair salon. And you and I will see value very differently. So value is in the eyes of the beholder. The second thing is, like you said, how consumers as a whole define value is constantly changing over time, right? Sometimes when our wallets are tight, we care about the best price.
Hmm.
Sometimes when we're flush with cash, we care about brand, right? So that's always changing too. And then the third thing is that you're using the word value. And when we talk about pricing, price is never about price. Oh, we think price is dollars and cents or
Hmm.
euros or whatever. It is always about the price value equation and the relationship, because price is ultimately just a culmination, a quantification of the value that's being provided, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we have we set up a very easy way of looking at it. So we called it PACAS, which is PAQAS. So price, assortment, quality, availability, and service ends up eating
Exactly.
the perception of value. Yeah.
Exactly. And I would, it's interesting you look at it that way. We also look at it very similarly, just slightly different, which is everything defines value, right? Not like you said, assortment is part of the value. That's, the product, the quality, obviously, the service that goes behind it.
Mm.
Value added services is a
Yep.
term that's is becoming part of our everyday nomenclature. Even in the product space, we used to think this was more purely services, but customer experience,
Yep.
right? Customer service, all of these things are all tied to value. And so, because of what I said, that value is always changing, it's so personalized, it means that retailers and brands can't rely or rest on their laurels. They must always have a pulse on the consumer, right? Especially because value is always changing. Also, in this world of transparency and elevated search,
Yes.
right? With AI, count two, elevated search has really grown. So consumers are looking to get more bang for their buck. They're doing a lot more in that. Before, they didn't have to do the research manually. Right now, it's
Mm.
automated. They just say, like, with the prompts, that this is what I want. And so value is becoming both, in some ways, commoditized
Yep.
and
Yep.
personalized.
Yes, I think the good thing is still what I notice about AI. So I've said it twice now as well, um, is that people are still using it like Google.
Yeah,
They're not giving it the right context. They're not giving it the right perspective to allow it to actually give you the real answer that you're looking for. So I think as retailers, I'm quite happy at the moment that the public at large, the consumer, is still not yet trained well enough to give context to the AI and is still using it like Google. When they stop using it like Google, I think then we've got a bigger problem, um,
exactly.
because that will really hurt us.
Exactly. But there's always step change, right, in behavior. And
Yeah.
we'll suddenly look back. And even now, we look back 6 months ago,
Mm.
people weren't using AI as much as they're using it right now.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
some of the stats that we saw from our holiday shopping study, which is that 54% of consumers plan to use AI in some capacity, either to do product comparisons,
Yeah.
deal alerts, price transparency, or price searching, or even general gift generation,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
There's so
Yep.
so we're, like you said, it's Google, but it's supercharged.
Yes.
And so over time, as that becomes the norm, it will be the next thing, right? And now it's all about redirecting. A lot of, I think, even stats say that retail driven or AI driven traffic to retailers was like up 800% for Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So there's a lot of the role that it plays already. And I
Yep.
just think about it compared to last year. And no one was talking about AI for shopping as much as they're doing it today. And that's how I know something's gone mainstream.
Yes. Yes.
It's that the everyday consumer has it,
Yes.
right? And it's
And
like,
and that's
it's
the key.
accessible. Yeah,
Yes. It's very accessible. It's relatively cheap because you can have your free version and get something out of it,
exactly.
but also you can pay your $20 a month, and get something that's extremely powerful. I mean, when we and you talk about consumers looking at pricing, many retailers, especially those retailers of an age like myself, still confuse pricing with discounting. because they look at
Yes.
it from only the perspective of the price needs to go down. So from your perspective, what's the difference between competing on price and competing on value, and why does it matter now more than ever?
So here's the interesting part. I'm just going to clarify one point before I go into the question you've asked me. Value, we think of as like, there's two definitions. The first definition is how I think of it. Value is the culmination of everything.
Yeah.
The second thing is what we tend to confuse with, this is the good value for the price paid. We just use value as a shorthand, but what we're really trying to say is this is good value for the price I'm paying.
Yes,
right?
for me.
Exactly, for me. So when we think about price, there's a few things. One, I'm going to call price as list price or MSRP, manufacturer suggested retail price, or something like that, because that is the culmination. That's the quantification of all the value from brand to product, to the assortment, to benefits, claims, experience, customer service, all that. Right? That's price. Discounts or promotions are incentives to drive a purchase, right? Now, my price strategy, like you have at a lot of mass, or discount retailers, dollar stores, all that, your big club, is that value proposition is best price or lowest price or bang for your buck, good value for the price I'm paying, right?
EDLP.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Now, typically when we think about the product life cycle, you want to start with, let's just take a brand, okay? You launch a product, that is your list price, your MSRP, right? You might promote it, and that's when I give a discount. I'm going to give you something that's off, dollars off, percent off, or I'm going to do some kind of other value-added promotion, right? And then eventually I get into the tail end of the life cycle of the SKU, and as I'm phasing it out, that's when I'm going to do markdowns and clearance to make way for new inventory. So consumers, we tend to not, it's very helpful when a consumer actually can understand the difference between this. Retailers get it, right? But the everyday person doesn't always think like that, which is there's going to be a launch price at the start of the season. If I think about seasonal products or whatever, then there's going to be a promotion or a discount, then there's going to be a markdown or clearance, and then it starts all over again. So again, value proposition, a lot of different things in here. Value proposition, but also distinction between the definitions.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, this is the problem because, each person is an individual, and their own individual perception on price could be very, very different. And trying to work that out becomes a bit of a nightmare, because getting down to almost customer specific pricing when you're talking about retailers and a grocery store, how do I price for you a box of cereal, a box of Kellogg's cornflakes, 500 gram? How do I price it for you, but also price it for the other 12,000 customers I've got coming in that day? It becomes very, very difficult. I mean, you've spoken
and that's
about
why, Mark, and that's why standard goods, right? Things that are branded, they come in a package. And that's why I think it's so important for retailers to really understand who their customer is.
Yes.
And then we're getting to topics like segmentation. Then we're getting into topics like channel, occasion, and so on. And so that is when, if you're buying something for instant consumption versus stock up in your pantry, very different willingness to pay potentially, right? When you're going to buy a candy bar at your corner, convenience store, or when you're going to go pick up your meds, that's very different of an occasion. When I'm actually going to the store and making a trip, the trip mission is different. So there's so many different things that go into it. But also we have to remember that like you said, that it's based on, you cannot do that much differentiation or that much personalized pricing in this world of price transparency. And that was the point I wanted to also make, that we have to be careful. And that you have to make sure, like, there's only some industries that have been able to get away with doing that, right? And that's the travel industry. But you have to be a little bit careful, because the more you try to do it, it can backfire. Right? The more you experiment with this personalized or dynamic pricing in industries where it's less acceptable, can be kind of a risky move.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, one of the things that you've spoken about is the psychology of price.
Yeah.
And I in fact, did a whole Retail 101 online episode on pricing and the psychology of pricing, that went on for nearly an hour, I think, because there was so much involved in it. Can you give us an example of how small perceptual shifts in pricing or even packaging can
Yep.
drive major changes in consumer behavior? And I specifically want a little bit of a focus on shrinkflation.
Yes. So a few things. There's a million ways to leverage consumer behavior, behavioral economics, consumer psychology, the intersection of all that. Because after all, the consumer is not rational.
Yeah.
And I wish they were. Here are a few common ones that I really love. One is price thresholds.
Yep.
This is such an easy one. And I think sometimes retailers forget and brands forget. It's that we don't necessarily think in complex terms. We just round things to the next magic price point, right? We're
Mhm.
not thinking in like $7.23. We're thinking $7.99, or we're thinking like $10, right? We're thinking these like simple mnemonics. So the more you can just employ psychological price thresholds or magic price points, that's one. The other is like decoy effects. You
Yep.
talked about like discounting. So you might have products that are next to each other, and you're like, wait a minute, why should I buy this SKU when SKU B obviously just has a lot more value for price on a normalized basis, right? So like price per unit, price per whatever, some kind of unit. So that's like this, what I'm going to call like a upsell or decoy effect.
Mhm.
Um, Goldilocks effect. There's the power in threes, right? We don't like it too hot. We don't like it too cold. We like it just right. Things like the endowment effect.
Yep.
If you take something away from me, I want it even more. I hold on to it even more, right? So like when I'm signing up for something, everything's checked in a service. And they say, well, if there's anything you want to opt out of, and then you have to like manually check, you're like, no, but I want it all. So all of these like little mental tricks that just play on consumerism, if you will, or desire to have it all.
Oh, absolutely. I
Um,
mean, one of the things that we did for a retailer that I worked for, 15 years ago now at least, we had a perception from the consumer that our prices were quite expensive in general. We were seen as higher priced. So what we did, we took the survey before we did this experiment. We took the survey and they said, yeah, you're quite expensive. And then 2 weeks later, we changed one simple thing and did the survey again. And customers say, no, you're very good value now. And believe it or not, all we did was we changed the signage on the end cap from A4 to A2. That was it.
mm,
The same price, the same products, the same price. All we did was change the size of the promotional material, the literature. And
wow.
customers all of a sudden perceived us as being good value.
I know, that's what I mean. I think like part of it is retailers, we spend so much time agonizing over the details.
Mm,
We got to remember the consumer is making decisions not based on complex math or systems. They're looking for heuristics, right? They're looking for
yes.
like simple, I think it's called like system one, system two thinking, right? So they're just looking for those quick, I like quick life hack type
Quick
of thing.
wins, yeah. I mean, the other thing that we did is we found the key value items
Yeah.
within the store, and these were the items that customers basically knew the prices of.
Yep.
And there were actually 41 of them in a hypermarket, believe it or not, only 41 items. So what we did is we actually did a couple of things. We placed the item at the start of the aisle
Uh-huh.
because that was also the item that customers used as a reference. So it became a key reference item. They
Yep.
used it as a reference to find the rest of the category or subcategory. We then gave it a bit of extra space on the shelf and at eye level, and we made the pricing ticketing slightly larger, and we had the best price for it in the market.
Yep.
Now, what happened again was that consumers perceived that not only were we well priced for that item, but we were well priced for the rest of the category as well.
Exactly. And
So,
you're doing basically what we call is like price image,
yes, yep,
right? Or price perception, price image. Now, exactly right. There's key value items. The way we do it at Simon-Kucher is we have A, B, C, D, E.
yep,
All right. And like you said, your 8 items are going to be few. It's usually about single digits
yes,
in
yep,
terms of the entire assortment, but they typically make up a third of revenue. These are your bananas, your eggs, your
yep,
milk, right? Like the stuff that everyone needs to buy that goes into almost every basket.
yep,
And so you got to be really sharp on pricing for those things so that it then creates a favorable impression. And you might even like sometimes be competitive on those products, might be underpriced on those products relative to competition, right? And then that helps boost a positive price image perception. You then, as you go to B, C, D, E becomes your margin builders,
yes, yep,
right? And you're balancing the fact that I've probably taken a little bit of a price cut on A, but I make it up on E, like my olive oil or like my specialty goods that not, very few people put in their basket, but they really care about those SKUs.
yes, yes,
And so then that is exactly right. And typically then your revenue breaks out into a third, a third, a third. But what you have is this really long tail
yep.
of SKUs that don't necessarily make up a ton of revenue, but
But they're still
again,
important to the basket.
very important to
Yeah.
complete the basket.
I mean, this is what we did when we were looking at assortment building, because there were certain items that looked from a volume perspective like we should be destocking them, not
Yep.
in the assortment. But then when we did the further analysis, what we found was that they only appeared in baskets above a certain level. So above 1,000 dirhams, they appeared in these baskets. Now, that was our high value, high frequency customers.
Yeah.
So why would I destock it? Because it was actually important to that customer because it formed part of their basket and it was in nearly every basket above a certain level. So
Yeah.
therefore, again, retailers sometimes look at things in only one dimension rather than looking at it multidimensionally. Because, as I said earlier, the way we used to do it before was let's discount the product and get some traffic. But okay, price discounting does only get traffic. It doesn't get repeated loyalty customers who will actually drive margin, which is what you need
Right.
to run a retail store.
Yep.
And when we're looking at things like pricing now and margin squeeze, we're living through a period of inflation, cost pressure, margin squeeze. Dare I say the other big T word, tariffs, for you guys in particular. What do you see as the most common mistakes that retailers make when trying to manage profitability under pressure?
First of all, I mean, what a time, right?
What a
So
time to be
from
alive, yeah.
especially in the US, you talk about high inflation, the K economy, where you've got 10%, the top 10% of consumers in the US are contributing to 50% of the spend.
Yeah,
So imagine what the struggle is for the average person.
yep,
Um, and so then that translates into obviously further inflation through tariffs, right? Or at least perception of tariffs and just general downward pressure, right? And we're still benchmarking. A lot of retailers and businesses are still benchmarking either to 2019 or the peak period of the peak business periods of the last few years, which are 21 and 22,
mm,
right? When we all had we were flushed with stimulus checks and so on. And so this is really the challenge, is that there's so much volatility. In the past, I thought, I always felt like economic cycles were a little bit longer,
hmm,
but now it feels like economic cycles are in like 6 months to about 24 months. So one to
yes,
roughly half to 2 years in terms of the constant flip flop. So I do think, with retailers, they're under a lot of margin pressure because there's only so much that you can do to pass prices on, depending on the segment of consumers that you're serving. If you're serving premium or high net worth individuals, no problem. But if you're
yep,
serving the everyday consumer, it's a volume game, right? And so you got to be careful because you don't want to accidentally, damage long-term loyalty and then have retention issues and not be able to acquire those customers again in the future, right? So I think the first thing is this triggering word, T word, tariffs, is that a lot of retailers are still, well, now it's a bit settled, but still figuring out the true impact of tariffs.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, the true impact of importing products from elsewhere. What does it do to their cost? How do we assign that cost to a unit basis, and so on, to then understand our true profit per unit or profit per product, and so on. And then you have to think about how much do we pass on? How much of this is going to be something we absorb, and how much of it is passed on? All right. Then you got to figure out, well, of what we're passing on, where are we passing this on, right? If you think about what we just talked about, that A, B, C, D, E, you don't want to be passing it on using a peanut butter spread, because that's going to be, again, you're trying to maintain price, image, and perception. So maybe you're passing it on your CDE or your longer tail products versus your A and Bs. So there's so much work that goes into it. And the other challenge is because tariffs are also evolving. I mean, now, like I said, but the first 6 months, 8 months of the year, we were just constantly rerunning numbers because we didn't know what the true impact was going to be, or what the true, when the dust settled, what the true implications and percentages and calcs would be. So what this means for retailers is that you just got to have nimble and agile processes, right? If I think about the fact that there's ability to work with data, retailers are in a massively data-rich environment, but many of them still struggle to create the views and look at it the way they want. So this is like an ongoing, never-ending project that the head of data, the chief information officer, or whoever, needs to be involved with, because you can't make fast decisions if it takes you like 4 months to get to the views and reports that you need.
Exactly. I mean, that was my next question was, we're increasingly data driven. We used to sort of run our business on instinct a lot, whether it's come, sometimes from the head, but from the heart and from the gut. It's very instinctual. However, and I've noticed this over the last 40 years I've been in retail, is we now rely on data, and whether that's AI, dynamic pricing, personalization. Sometimes the technology could outpace the ethics behind it. How would you advise companies to strike the right balance between personalization and fairness? Because even a HNWI still wants value. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if they feel squeezed and they feel as though a price is being pitched at them because of more of an ability to pay, rather than back down to the value of the product, how do you advise companies about that?
It's tricky. You have to be very careful with dynamic pricing, personalization, right? And I think, first of all, I wouldn't say it's necessarily, I think ethics is a very loaded term, right? So I think what I'm getting at is there are businesses that already do that, right? We hotel rooms and so on. You could argue that even though we're still sitting together, a row ahead of me versus a row behind me when I bought the ticket, like there's an element of personalization that's been around for 40 years, 40 plus years. So fine, we are more accepting of it. Now, personalization is more accepted when you're getting unique services.
Yes.
But I think you have to be careful because, things like price gouging, things like surge pricing, those aren't things that you will get called out on, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially in this macro environment, there will be, and with transparency, you have to balance the cost with the benefits to understand, is this something we want to pursue? What is the outcome? What are the risks? How will consumers react? Who are our target consumers? Have we gotten their feedback, right? do we believe in this as like part of our value proposition? There's so many different criteria that you have to first evaluate,
Yeah.
right? How do we make sure that there's no bias when we do something like personalized pricing? How do we make sure that there's enough human moderation if we're automating this process? How do we
Yes.
have governance and escalation rules? And so I think it's more acceptable when there's something that's tailored, or there's an experiential service value added element. But I think when it's the same thing, exact same product, I think that's when things can get a little dicey.
Absolutely. I mean, again, go back to my example earlier of Kellogg's cornflakes 500 gram. The box is the same essentially for everybody. And you talk a lot. We talk a lot about cluster pricing and pricing management across multiple different stores, regions, etc. But with all the transparency that's available nowadays, even if you're pricing across a city, and we had different pricing for the different formats. So, the hypermarket was the base, then you went to a supermarket, then you went to a C store, and then you went to a fuel station store. And the prices adjusted upwards based upon the convenience that we're offering, which was where the service element came in. But we would still have customers say, well, I went to the hypermarket and it was this price, and I go to the fuel station and it's this price. Why? Then we had to have the answer for that to be able to sort of give them the comfort that we're not gouging in a fuel station. It's just more convenient on a fuel station. Therefore, that's where you are, and that's what the price is. I mean,
but you're describing something different, Mark. That's not so much personalized pricing. That's more retail-based pricing. I think there's still price differentiation based on format, like you said.
I think
consumers are a little bit more wary of like exact identical purchase process, but seeing different prices.
Yes, yeah, I think that's right. Because most customers understand that there is a convenience element as you go from the hyper to the fuel station.
Right.
I mean, your early career was in investment banking and capital markets. How did that experience shape the way that you think now about commercial strategy and value creation?
I think what my first job in investment banking taught me was how to work really long hours. So that's what I've taken away from it.
So you definitely understand retailers then.
Yes, exactly. No, I think in all seriousness, a lot of it is just about pricing strategy. A lot of this is numerical, right? Like the data driven aspect that we bring to the job. That is something I also learned in my first job, but obviously is a skill set that I've honed at Simon-Kucher. Impact, right? You have to always drive towards impact. What's going to get you to impact? So that to me is really critical. Something that obviously finance gives you a good foundation for. But then of course, like just ability to, the grit and resilience that also come with having to work long hours and iterate on a document for version 117 is that. So but value creation to me is something that I've always thought about, right? Like from as a math and economics major in college. So it's just something that is how can businesses improve? How can they think about revenue as the sky's the limit? And that's one of the things why I really like working at Simon-Kucher, because because we don't do cost cutting, right? Cost can at some point eventually just go down to zero or asymptotically to zero, but revenue has no limit. So I think that's one of the things that I find very exciting about value creation.
Yeah, and I mean that's an interesting thing, because I mean for the last 10, maybe 15 years, I've been trying to suggest to the board that I've worked for and worked with that we should actually have zero budgeting. Because if you go for a budget, which is, let's say, an arbitrary 5% above last year, then surely that limits you. You're talking about unlimited revenue. But if you say, okay, the budget's 5% on last year, then all you do is you work to that 5% because you limit yourself naturally. And it's the same on the other way with, for
Right.
example, shrinkage and wastage. We give a budget of 1% or 1.2%, whatever it may be, and people move up to that limit of 1.2%. And I've always said we should actually have zero budget for for shrinkage and wastage because
Interesting.
then you're aiming down to it.
Exactly.
So by tackling both ends of the chain, revenue should be unlimited. Don't stop just because you've made your
Right.
budget, which people do
Exactly.
naturally. They get not lazy, but they get happy and they get comfortable and think, okay, I don't need to do too much more now because I've made my budget. But if you actually just leave it as unlimited, then it gives some people something to just keep aiming for and keep striving for.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, many of our
It's a
listeners.
mountain with no top.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You can just keep going. Why stop at 10% plus? Why stop at X% plus?
Yeah.
It's arbitrary and it's an unknown. It's a number that we've plucked out the air because, somebody said, okay, GDP is going to grow by this much next year. We think we can get this many more customers, blah, blah, blah. No, basically people will try to get away with what they think they can get away with in terms of giving us a number. Well,
Yeah.
don't give me a number. Just be more than last year, as much as you can be versus last year. I mean, many of the listeners work in operational day-to-day roles, so store managers, category heads, supply chain leaders. What would you say to them about the role they play in executing a pricing strategy successfully on the front line?
So I would say that folks that are in these operational roles are some of the most critical folks in a pricing strategy, right? Because when they are, especially those that are in customer facing roles, right, or having to make decisions based on customer input, such as store
Mhm.
managers or category leads and so on, they have to know who their customer is, how to sell the value of the product or service, understand how it fits into the retailer's value proposition, you know. And sometimes if there's price changes, they're the ones on the ground doing those manual price changes, right? Yeah. Um, so ultimately, I think that they are sort of both the first and last line of defense when it comes to pricing strategy. So they play an incredibly important role. And supply chain leaders also, I think, especially, we talked a lot about tariffs, and they've had quite a year trying to figure out, is this the right supply chain? Do we need to make, if we need to make investments now, how do we adjust it? Is there something we can do in the short term? How do we renegotiate contracts? What is going to be the true cost impact? Like, they've had a lot of pressure
Yes.
this
Oh,
year
huge.
trying to exactly. So ultimately, I think supply chain leaders obviously are some of the more in the value chain, more at the start of the value chain, whereas, and then it goes to like category heads and revenue management teams, all the way to store managers who are really, and the store associates, which are really the front lines.
Mm,
So in my mind, they all play a critical role. It's just different depending on the strategy.
absolutely. I think, I mean, from my perspective, what I've seen over the years, one of the missing perspectives is that you've got the people at the head office who actually make the decision to change the price. We actually don't tell the stores until the price change gets run overnight.
Yeah,
But actually, if you communicate to the stores the pricing strategy, some of the elements behind why the price is changing, then at least they are forewarned, therefore forearmed.
exactly.
So that when the
Yeah,
consumer does come and complain to the checkout operator, to the department head, to the store manager that the price has gone up, then at least they have, a crib sheet of things they can say to that consumer, that customer, to say what's happened with the price.
yeah.
And I think more communication is better rather than just sending a batch of price changes through, and you take the hits on the shop floor.
Yeah, we call
Um,
this objection handling, right? Are you arming your team with selling the value? So value selling, value training, value communication, and objection handling.
Absolutely. We also hear a lot about retail reinvention, but sometimes this feels like a buzzword. So, what do you believe the future of retail value looks like over the next few years?
I wish I had a crystal ball. Mark.
Well,
But what
yeah,
I
me
will
too.
say is that everything is shifting away from transactional
Mhm.
to relational,
Yes.
right? And you see this everywhere. It's not just purely I go in because I need something, I buy the thing that I need and I leave. There's so much more focused on experience, even when it's products. Try to bring in the connection to the brand, whatever it may be, right?
Yes.
Whatever your connection might be. Trying to make sure we're targeting the right folks with the brand that we want, not trying to be all things to everybody,
Yes.
because
And being unapologetic about it. You know,
exactly saying this is
customers
what
value that authenticity.
exactly like strategy is not just what you will do, but also what you won't do, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
And so that's what I think it's going to be. Obviously, with AI, right? It's the way where it's going to supercharge businesses is going to look different. Agentic AI, personalized shopping agents, all of those are getting big. They're going to be, we have Sparky and Rufus that are going to help push people building their basket, right? And keeping consumers on their platform. So in some way, there's going to be a lot of change. And that's what I'm getting at. It has just been constant change after the other. First was COVID, then it was like the post-pandemic surge, then it was like rise of inflation, then it was more like, really high rates, and so mortgages and housing, and now we're talking about potential corrections, or this year it's all been about tariffs and unaffordability. And so
Yes.
there's so, and I'm unemployment. And so there's so much that is going on that it's very difficult to really distill positives and negatives. But I think that for retailers to hold on to their target customers, they're going to have to move away from just a like
A
check it
transaction.
transaction, and you
Mm.
come in, you check out, you say goodbye, right? Flagship stores are becoming a thing even more and more now.
Yes. Yes, and those flagship stores are becoming more sort of community centres, and that's what we did sort of during the COVID time period, and straight away after that as well for a couple of years, is that we looked at our consumers and we became community centres. So we
Exactly.
were the centre of that community for wherever we were, to the extent that I actually joined every single community Facebook page where we had a store. Um,
Yeah.
and which meant that I could answer consumers' questions directly. So when
Yeah.
somebody complained about one of our stores in a particular community, I could answer them directly, and they all knew I was the CEO of the company, which meant that we nipped things in the bud and we resolved 99% of complaints within 5 to 10 minutes.
Yep.
Which again just solidified that fact that we were there for them during COVID, and we're still there
Yep.
for them afterwards as well.
Yep.
Um, okay,
What a great
that's
best practice, right? That's such a great best practice to just
oh
be
yeah.
near your customers. Yeah.
Oh, it was great because I mean by joining that community, when we open new stores and we were opening a new store in a specific community, we would actually invite customers to come to the store to have a preview of the store whilst we were building it. So we took them
Yep.
around it, we showed them where things were going to be. We had that discussion about what else are you looking for, because we're a supermarket. What can we do, and here's what we can't do, unfortunately, because of X, Y, and Z. Which again automatically gave us that customer ambassador
Yep.
almost in the communities.
Yep.
So they also worked for us quite well. Um,
Amazing. Amazing.
so I mean, that's before we wrap up. One of the things that I like to do for Retail 101 Online is to break things down into three simple takeaways,
Yep.
three simple things. So if we think about what we've discussed today in today's session, what three simple things would you like the listeners to take away from today?
Sure. Sure. Number one is that understanding your value and your differentiators and how to quantify all that into the price.
Hmm.
You know, moving away from cost plus pricing or margin based pricing into value based pricing.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two is to know your customer, right? And like we talked about towards the end, know which customers you want to serve and also the ones you don't want to serve. So having a very targeted segmentation,
Yep.
because a one size fits all is a one size fits none.
100%.
And the third thing is, as you think about the future of retail and you future proof your business, you're going to have to make investments across everything. Your ability to make decisions faster, which will be based on data, but also moving away from transactional interactions to relationship based, interactions, so that you can really serve this customer and keep consumers for a much longer period of time, especially when it comes to macroeconomic headwinds.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's perfect. That's okay. So that's fantastic, Shikha. Thank you for joining us today. Everyone, that was Shikha Jain from Simon-Kucher, sharing a masterclass in pricing, purpose, and profit in today's retail world. It's now time to say goodbye from Shikha. Say goodbye, Shikha.
Bye, listeners. Thank you for having me, Mark.
That's okay. And of course, goodbye from me. We'll be back soon, probably now after the new year, with another Retail Voices episode. Check out retail101online.com for more details on upcoming guests. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell wherever you get your podcast fix. Welcome to the Retail Education Revolution.